Good evening, everyone. On this occasion of 109 Sunday Sahityik Satsang, I would like to request Dr. S. Puamma, the event coordinator of this month, to welcome the guest and introduce the Master of Ceremonies, please, ma'am.
Okay. Shall I, sir?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I feel honored to be part of Indigenous Society for the Promotion of English Language and Literature, a registered body with the motto, Facilitate to Elevate. I must thank the brainchild behind iSPELL, the founder and General Secretary, Professor J. Gansham sir, and the President of iSPELL, Madam Professor Anupama Vora, the Vice President, and all the executive members of iSPELL for always keeping this platform so live and vibrant and for chiseling the learners in a unique way. I extend a hearty welcome to all of you, and I feel honored today to welcome today's keynote speaker, young and active, Dr. Priyanka Shailat from USA, who will address the audience on second language acquisition theories and implications. It gives me great delight to welcome all the participants, erudite scholars, to the 109th Sunday Sahitya Satsang. A warm welcome to each and everyone present here. Before I wind up, let me welcome and introduce the Master of Ceremony, Mr. Lakshmikant H. Kapgate is a qualified assistant professor with an MA, NET, SET, MPhil, B.Ed, and has plunged into doctoral research program on an ongoing project from Gondwana University, Gadchiroli. Currently, he is working as an assistant professor in the Department of English, Shivaprasad Sadanand Jaiswal College, Arjun Morgan District, Gondia. He is working in the capacity of assistant coordinator of IQAC. He has put in 8 years of teaching experience, and he has published 7 research articles and has shown a lot of interest in the wide use of technology in teaching in language and literature. He is the designer and promoter of YouTube channel, Let's Learn to Shine. His Pick, a best screen capture tool, a full-featured screen capture tool, will enable you to learn and shine. He has delivered lectures on various topics at different places. His area of special interest is post-colonial studies and African literature. Within 8 years of teaching experience, Mr. Lakshmikant has shown a lot of interest in various learning areas and has proved his motto, learn to shine. I'm pretty impressed and very glad to present before you Mr. Lakshmikant Kapgate, the Master of Ceremony of the 109th Sunday Sahityik Satsang. Over to you, Kapgate, Lakshmikant.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Yeah. Thank you for your wonderful introduction. My special good morning to today's keynote speaker. Also, very good evening to all the listeners, all the members, all the coordinators, event coordinators, chairperson, and all the respective stakeholders of iSPELL India. Dear friends, iSPELL stands for Indigenous Society for the Promotion of English Language and Literature. Is going to organize 109th Sunday Sahityik Satsang today on the topic second language acquisition, theories and implications. Dear friends, I remember the slokas of Rigveda when I talk about iSPELL. It says, Ano Bhadra Krutiya Vantu Vishwata. It means let all the knowledge from all that come to us from all directions. Likewise, there is one line from Ulysses. He says, follow knowledge like the sinking star beyond the utmost bound of the human thought. And this iSPELL is carrying this kind of motto in his mind, in his uh, bucket, and it always facilitates to elevate all the newcomers like me and to the experts from different places, from different areas, also abroad. Now, let me tell you that this society believes that one can improve and elevate his or her abilities once are made available. Potential is always there. The need is to bring it out and uh, present on this such platform. So, dear friends, today we have a keynote speaker, Dr. Priyanka Shailat, working as an assistant professor of communicative disorder at Eastern New Mexico University, USA. Let me share something about ma'am. Dr. Shailat is a speech language pathologist and assistant professor at the Eastern New Mexico University, Hotels, United States of America. A member of hearing associations. Ma'am is an alumna of the All India Institute of Speech and Hearing, Mysuru, India.
Hello.
I think there is some internet problem
Yeah.
at Dr.
United
Ashwika.
Sir, you are not audible.
Hello.
Some internet issue.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, now you are.
Sorry for the disturbance and network issues.
Please
So,
switch off the if you are.
yes. So, ma'am is holding various positions, and ma'am holds a post-professional doctorate in speech language pathology from Loma Linda University in California, United States of America. As a speech language pathologist, ma'am has worked in a variety of clinical settings in India, Singapore, and United States of America. Ma'am has published various research papers in the areas of child language disorders, language processing, and bilingualism, and has co-authored various books for parents of children with communication disorders. So this is how ma'am is very much active in such areas. So with due respects, on behalf of iSPELL, I invite today's keynote speaker, Dr. Priyanka Shailat, ma'am. Please, ma'am, over to you.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Professor Kapgate. And I want to thank Dr. A.S. Puwama, Dr. Chaudhary, Mr. Pramod Dhengle, Professor G.S. Kansham for having me here today. And I also would like to thank the founder, Professor Anupama Vohra. I also want to extend my gratitude to all the attendees who are here today and maybe who will watch this lecture, who will watch this talk later on. So I am actually very happy and honored to be a part of this Sahityik satsang. I look forward to talk about a topic, second language acquisition, that is very relevant in today's world, in the company of educators, scholars, and also literature enthusiasts today. And as a speech language pathologist, we come across second language scenarios where we have to distinguish between the disordered language system versus a language system that is just different from the primary language. With this, I'm going to start my slideshow. And as I talk about second language acquisition, if you have any questions, I'm going to pause in between and take the questions. I'm also all right taking the questions at the end of the talk, but I will pause in between. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask those questions. All right.
Yeah.
So I dedicate this talk to Mr. Titi Mara Ramesh Mutarna, whom I lovingly call Ramesh Pujapa. He was the man who totally enjoyed talking about languages and cultures. Okay, so we all know that language is a code for communication. And by some account, we understand that language emerged somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa about 50 to 150,000 years ago. Now, why are we talking about second language acquisition? Where we did not have to talk about it if communities were not interacting with each other. So in a scenario where community A does not interact with community B, the child in community A may learn language A, and the child in community B may learn language B. So there is no question of second language acquisition, but what the child is still acquiring language. So there is a question of language acquisition. And first language for these children in different scenarios can be language A or B, depending on what community they belong to. However, today's social scenario is different, and there is interaction between languages. And that interaction takes place because of various reasons, such as globalization and cultural openness, which includes factors such as trade, exploration, digital technology, entertainment, etc. Historically, languages have interacted with each other due to various factors such as invasion, colonization, and how people traveled to explore different parts of the world. Now, when the languages interact with each other, there can be different scenarios where in a region,
तुम्हारे लिए थोड़ी है, फॉर्म सबके लिए है। तो किसी ने उसके बाद भी कोई डिग्री ली होगी तो उसके लिए किया है, पीएचडी करने के बाद सर्टिफिकेशन किया है। तुम यहाँ ज्वाइन करने के बाद किए क्या?
Sir, please mute.
ज्वाइन करने के यहाँ ज्वाइन करने के बाद नहीं, पीएचडी करने के बाद। तो
all right, let's continue. So when languages interact in a region, different phenomena can happen. For example, pidginization, creolization, and individuals can actually be in different stages of interlanguage. In those areas, there can be two dominant languages, there can be one dominant and one non-dominant languages, and we can also have scenarios where there is no dominant language. For instance, in India, we have different regions and people speak different languages, and we also migrate to different parts of India. So when a person migrates to a different parts of India, there is a dominant language, and then this person also has his or her own language, which is actually a non-dominant language. Right. Now, this complex interaction between languages varies across situations, creating unique patterns of second and additional language acquisition. So when I'm talking about second language acquisition, I'm not just addressing the language that is acquired after the first language acquired. I'm also talking about additional languages that a person may choose to acquire after acquiring the primary language or the native language. Now, learner characteristics differ based on when, where, and how second language acquisition occur. Now, before we dive deep into the topic of second language acquisition, I'm going to talk briefly about types of bilingualism. Now, there are different types of bilingualism. There is something called primary bilingualism or the secondary bilingualism. In primary bilingualism, the second language is actually acquired under natural conditions, whereas in secondary bilingualism, language acquisition takes place through deliberate effort and instructions, like a person may learn second language in school. With this, we also come to the second classification that I have in here, that is natural bilingualism, school bilingualism, and cultural bilingualism. Now, in natural bilingualism, the language is usually acquired before schooling, and the child acquires language through daily communication. When it comes to school bilingualism, as the name reflects, the child acquires second language in school. And when it comes to cultural bilingualism, an adult can learn a second language for work or travel or other reasons. Now, there is also something called as elective versus immigrant bilingualism. Now, elective bilingualism is when a person chooses to learn a second language or third language by choice. However, in immigrant bilingualism, a person must learn a second language or the third language in order to interact with the society that the person has migrated to. Now, bilingualism, or when the languages interact with each other, there can be positive effects or negative effects. When we talk about positive effects, it happens when the language proficiency in one language supports the language acquisition or learning in the second language. But in subtractive bilingualism, increased proficiency in one language can actually reduce the proficiency in the second language. Then there is also something called as compound versus coordinate bilingualism. In compound bilingualism, both L1 and L2 operate with the same mental scheme. However, in coordinate bilingualism, there are separate mental lexicons for L1 and L2. Now, we also have something called simultaneous versus successive or sequential bilingualism. In simultaneous bilingualism, both languages are acquired at the same time from birth. However, in sequential or successive bilingualism, L2 acquisition occurs after L1 acquisition. And then we also have something depending on what is the age of the person who's acquiring the language. So there can be early, late versus adult bilingualism. By early bilingualism, I mean when the language is acquired early in the childhood from 0 to 6 years. By late bilingualism, we mean when the language is acquired from 6 to puberty, and adult bilingualism talks about when the language is acquired after puberty. Now we have spoken about bilingualism. Now let's talk about how language is acquired. So I'm going to talk about how first language is acquired, and then we're going to look at the similarities, if there are any similarities between first language acquisition and the second language acquisition. So I'm going to touch upon the major theories of language acquisition. Now, we understand that language acquisition actually has both endogenous factors and exogenous factors that are responsible for language learning. So there is nature that is important, and there is also nurture that is important. By nature, I mean the biological factors. By nurture, I mean the environmental factors. So, for example, on this slide, I am talking about some biological maturation factors that actually help in language acquisition. So in early childhood, we can see that there is an increase in brain size. And as the individual grows older, there can be other processes such as synaptogenesis, dendrogenesis, myelination, synaptic pruning, which leads to changes in gray matter and white matter. Now we have to understand that brain goes through major changes during the early part of development. But as the person grows older, changes still happen in brain, but they are not as huge as they are when the person is developing or when the person is little or a child. And we have to also understand that all these changes actually lead to something called neuroplasticity. Now, this neuroplasticity actually enables brain to change with experience. So when a person is exposed to languages, there are changes happening in the brain. So when the person acquires first language, brain changes happen. Does anyone have any questions regarding this? I know there are a lot of biological terms, and we can talk about it at the end of the presentation as well. And so by nurture, we mainly mean like, early part of the life, there is interaction between the caregiver and the child. And as the person goes to school, there is interaction between peers and teachers, and then person grows older. So the way that we keep interacting throughout our lives using language, which leads to changes in our brain. Now, how does it relate?
Dr. Priyanka,
Yes.
Other than bilingualism, there are some people, who are multilingual. They're proficient in quite a few 10 to 12 languages. My question is, will they be proficient in all the languages that they have acquired, or will there be a lopsided development in their speech?
Thank you for the question, Dr. Pugama. So proficiency can vary. So, like, for instance, when a person speaks 2 languages, the proficiency in first language and second language can be different. For instance, like we speak about subtractive bilingualism, where proficiency in first language actually reduces with the acquisition of second language. Similarly, we can see scenarios when a person knows like 10, 12, or like n number of languages, and the person actually can have different proficiency in these languages depending on how the person has acquired those languages, when the person started acquiring those languages, and is the person getting enough time to practice those languages. And we also have some factors such as motivation. So there can be languages where the person finds more connectedness psychologically or socially with that particular language. So the person will be more proficient in that language and will research to learn more about that language, versus if there is a language where the person is just using it to interact in a society that the person has migrated to. So it will all depend on our interest, what age, what methods were used, and if the person is getting enough time to practice the language. So yes, the proficiency can vary across languages in an individual.
I have another serious problem. Like, I almost love all languages. I feel that each and every language has its own beauty within itself. So I love Kannada, that's our language here. I love Kodava language. I love English, and I love Malayalam and Tamil. So I've almost learned quite a bit of Malayalam and these languages. But then when I begin to speak Tamil, I just move towards Malayalam. I don't know why. What do you call that? Because I'm not fluent in Tamil. I get back to Malayalam. So what do you call that?
So that can be actually, you bring a very interesting factor to the table, that is similarities between the languages. So there can be two effects of having similarities between the two languages. So one, it can facilitate, like once because you know Malayalam and there are similarities between Tamil, so you can use that knowledge to learn Tamil language. But at the same time, if you are more exposed or you are around speakers who speak Malayalam language more, then it can actually interfere when you start to talk in Tamil. So maybe that is what is happening. Dr. Pugama, do you have any other questions?
No, that was my, serious problem. Like I wanted to learn Tamil, and the moment I begin to speak, I get back to Malayalam. So I wanted to know, like, what is the kind of a medical term, the kind of problem that we have within ourselves. I couldn't really decipher that. So I thought,
yes.
I'd ask you
Well,
that.
I'll tell you that. So if you have different proficiency, and if one language is actually you are switching to another language, so that's code switching, but it is not a disorder. It's like a normal process of language learning. So what happens is that you start to interact in Tamil and then you switch to Malayalam language, maybe because you're using it more and you have more people around you who speak that language.
Maybe. Yeah, that could be the factor. I move along with Malayalis more than the Tamil speaking, probably. I think that could be one of the reasons. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. And a lot of it is also habit. So habits are like hard to change. So for instance, when I speak in one language, I often when I become informal, I switch to my native language, and then I have to remind myself, like, hey, the other person doesn't know my language. So I quickly code switch to the language that we're interacting in. So I think we have to make conscious effort in those situations.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's see how biological maturation applies to second language acquisition. So when we talk about biological maturation, since I said that, brain is more plastic when we're younger, and as we're older, brain is still plastic, but the plasticity reduces. So should we start early to learn second language, or is it late? Fine too. Now, we do understand that grammar learning ability is preserved throughout the childhood and declines rapidly in late adolescence. An L2 learning ability and ultimate attainment, that is the native-like proficiency, is best when language acquisition begins before 10 to 12 years of age. Now, so we do understand that early start is fine. So if you start acquiring second language early, then your chances of gaining native-like proficiency are higher. So do we not learn second language once we have crossed this age? No, we can still learn second language because brain-induced changes due to L2 still take place throughout our lives. So there are changes in gray matter. There is an increased gray matter density. The white matter integrity, it also affects white matter integrity in children, adult, and elderly. And it can happen even with very short exposure to a language or short-term training in the second language. So when we talk about, now I spoke about native-like proficiency. So I do want to emphasize on this fact that native-like proficiency is actually a socially informed phenomena. So what do we think, what we consider a native-like proficiency can actually differ according to the society that we belong in. So as educators, it is important for us that we understand that, circumstances and individual differences are there. Brain is plastic early, and as the person grows older, brain is still plastic. We also understand the role of acquisition and critical period varies across linguistic domains as well. For example, pronunciation, you can acquire frequent native pronunciation if the exposure is before 6 years. For meaning, the window is a little larger from 7 to 15, and then for syntax, it goes further. It's even larger, so the person can acquire native-like syntactic proficiency when the person is 15 years or older. Now, let's talk about a very famous theory, linguistic theory by Noam Chomsky. In his theory, he talks about that children are born with language acquisition device. So basically what he's talking about is that we as humans are predisposed to learning language. And he says we're able to do that because in our brain, there is a structure that is called linguistic acquisition device, which has universal grammar rules. And this enables a person to learn language automatically. So we don't have to learn language through explicit instructions. And he says that because children are able to acquire language pretty quickly. So it's like newborn does not talk, cries, and then you have they start cooing, babbling, and then the first word, they will acquire first word, and then around 18 months, they will start combining. When they have a vocabulary of around 50 words, they will start combining words. And then after that, by the time they're 5 years old, they can speak in complete sentences. So the development happens very rapidly. So he says there is no way that you can teach all of it explicitly so that we as humans are predisposed to learning language. Now, in this theory, we also talk about deep structure, surface structure, and transformation rules that actually convert deep structure information into the surface structure information. The focus of this theory is on syntax, that is how words are combined. And it talks about that to trigger this language acquisition device, we just need slight environmental input. So this theory does talk about environmental input, but it tells that you just need to trigger the language acquisition device. And once the language acquisition device is triggered, the person will acquire language automatically. So for example, here is a child. So he's talking about, we have this language acquisition device in brain, and the child will have deep structure where the child has an idea like, hey, I want to play with ball. And then this idea will get transferred to surface structure, and the person is able to formulate a sentence to express what the person wants to say. Now, how does it apply to second language acquisition? So this theory actually helps us understand that biology is important for language acquisition. And it also talks about that, second language learning can also, so we can say that since there is a language acquisition device, now this language acquisition device has universal rules. So these rules can actually facilitate the learning of second language as well. And this information applies to interlanguage, which is actually grammar that changes in the acquisition process. It is the influence of L1 and L2 rules are applied. So, with this knowledge, we can say that if we apply this knowledge to second language acquisition, we can say that language acquisition device will probably also support learning of second language because it has universal rules. And these universal rules can actually help transfer information from deep structure to the surface structure of L1 or L2. Now let's take a look at another theory that is B.F. Skinner's theory or behavioral theory. According to this theory, language is learned through people around the child. Now, language is a verbal behavior, and a child is actually considered a passive person in this process, and the person acquires language through the principles of behavior learning. So for instance, when the child says, I want ice cream, child is given ice cream, child feels happy. So there are chances that child is going to ask for ice cream again using I want ice cream. And maybe the child will also say, I want pizza. If the child is given pizza, soon after the child says this utterance. But if the child says that want and people don't understand, then there are likelihood that child will stop using this pattern. Now let's see what happens in second language acquisition. So we can say that principles of behavior learning can also be applied to second language acquisition. For instance, when a person acquiring second language speaks a sentence in the second language, people around him get happy and they praise him or say, wow, wonderful job. For instance, a child can go to school and then, present or participate in a debate in second language and everybody around him feels happy. He probably gets an award as well. So there are chances that the child is going to practice this language again and again. However, if the child does not say utterances or the person does not say utterances in second language accurately, and the person gets like feedback like, hey, you need to try again, fix it again. If there are too many negative feedbacks that the child gets, then or the person gets, then maybe the person will think like twice before using the second language. Does anyone have any questions? Theories can be a little bit dry, so if you have any questions, you can ask. All right, looks like we don't have any questions. Okay, so let's talk about the cognitive theory now. Major proponent of the cognitive theory is Jean Piaget. So he spoke about that cognition actually develops in stages, and the development in cognition also helps in language learning. So in this particular theory, child is an active learner with cognitive constraints. Now, so Piaget actually talks about different stages like sensory motor, pre-operational, concrete operational, formal operational thinking, and it provides in these stages, these cognitive processes actually provide foundation for language development. So when the child is exposed to the external stimulus, the child makes or the person makes changes into the internal representation of those concepts. And if there is a disequilibration between the two, then accommodation or assimilation takes place to achieve that equilibrium. So let's see how it applies to second language acquisition. So with this understanding, we have to understand what stage the person or what stage the language learner is in. So for instance, if there is a young child, so we have to choose activities that are very concrete and easy. We cannot use like abstract linguistic units to facilitate language learning. We cannot do too much explicit teaching, especially I'm talking about sensory motor stage where the child is from 0 to 2 years of age. But as the person is older and the person is in formal operational stage, that is beyond 11 years, then we can say that, you can introduce more abstract entities to facilitate language learning. And it can also explain interlanguage as a process of adaptation. So for instance, somebody says, a second language learner says, I ball, play, want. Now the person hears, I want to play with the ball, and the person assimilates and accommodates according to this information and says, I want to play ball. And then with more exposure, adaptation takes place, and the person is able to say, I want to play with ball. So basically, assimilation is that you acquire information and you include it in your mental schema and adapt. So, and accommodation is that you change your mental schema based on the external information. There is a change happening in the mental schema. So let's talk about another theory, that is social interaction theory. Now, this theory talks about that child learns language through social interaction. And role of caregiver, peer, teacher, or anybody who's more knowledgeable in the language has a role to facilitate language development. And it is important that activities related to language learning fall in the zone of proximal development, which is slightly above the child's current level. So it is something that the child can acquire with more knowledgeable adults, and this is way higher than the child's current ability. So if a material is in this area, then the child will find it very frustrating, and child will not be able to achieve it even with the help of more knowledgeable others. Now let's see how it applies to second language acquisition. So we have something called socio-cultural theory to talk about second language acquisition. So it connects development and appropriate instruction levels. So we have to understand that when the instructions are given, they fall in the zone of proximal development. And it also relates to another second language acquisition theory that talks about comprehensible input hypothesis, where the input has to be given at I+1 level. So when we're choosing activities for learning as educators, we have to be careful that we choose activities that fall in the zone of proximal development. That is something a learner can achieve with the help of more knowledgeable others. And this more knowledgeable others can be, we can have activities like where the person interacts with the peers. We can have activities where the person interacts with the teacher, or anybody who has more knowledge of the language than this person who is learning the language. And it also encourages use of exchanges between the learner and the proficient user. So for instance, learner says, you played soccer yesterday, and then teacher says, yes, I played soccer yesterday. So there's like little change. There's like not a lot of change. So we're thinking that this teacher is actually trying to facilitate language in the zone of proximal development. So we have one more theory, that is interactionalist approach, and it actually combines both nature and nurture, like nature and nurture aspects of theories. So it acknowledges that, yes, we need predisposing factors to learn language. Learning is important. Social interaction is also important, and child is an active participant in language learning. Now, for second language acquisition, there is something called complexity theory, which talks about that language learning is actually a complex system, and it acknowledges the change in structure and working interlanguage. And it also talks about that interlanguage proceeds based on cognitive abilities, and interlanguage is also influenced by social interaction. So this theory actually talks about cognition and social interaction and their role in learning second language. All right, so we now understand that we can apply some factors that we have come across in language acquisition to second language acquisition. For example, role of nature and nurture and their interaction, and then factors that influence differently based on type of bilingualism or multilingualism, that is when the language is acquired, where the language is acquired, and how the language is acquired. And then role of biology, we know that early, late versus adult bilingualism, there are changes in neuroplasticity, but the degree of change differs according to the age of a person. And then we also know that we can consider linguistic variables like sound system. We know that, when the child is exposed to the second language early, then the phonology is native-like, and it differs for grammar, meaning, and use. And then role of cognitive factors. So we do understand that cognition also has a role. We have to choose activities that are in the cognitive, that are appropriate for the cognitive development of the learner. So there are things that we have to take care of, like attention, memory, stage of cognitive development, suitability, and then natural, using strategies that promote natural language learning versus explicit instruction to facilitate language learning. And we also understand that role of more knowledgeable others can also be applied to second language acquisition. And that's social interactionism.
Dr.
Yes.
Priyanka, here, I don't know, it's just my thought. Does language theory accommodate this principle that in order to learn any language, we need to have we need to give importance to 4 skills of learning any language, like the reading skill, writing skill, listening, and speaking. So if we can apply that theory to all the languages, that whatever you want to learn, it could be bilingual, multilingual, or whatever. It may be time is a factor probably, but then don't you think that would definitely help one to achieve proficiency in any language that you want to learn? In the scenario, what does the language theory propose?
So you're talking about different modalities like reading, writing,
the 4 skills of learning
listening.
any language. To learn any language, we need to have these 4 important skills. The more you read that language, write, speak, listen to, I mean, it's at that level. Is it talking about the higher proficiency, or for the basic level, it is entirely different? How does it go? What does the theory suggest?
So what we're talking right now are theories of language acquisition. So when we talk about language acquisition, we talk about the native language that the child learns as the child is growing older. So that acquisition process starts right from birth, and there are some accounts that tell that language learning takes place, like when the child is in the womb. When we talk about other learning modalities, so speaking and listening starts pretty early in the stages of development. And as the child goes to school, then we also introduce reading and writing modality. But we have to understand that listening and speaking is actually implicitly embedded in the child's environment, because we all use language to communicate.
Yeah.
When it comes to reading and writing, we have to focus that it is not natural for human beings to read and write. It has come through the development of language and need to save knowledge and preserve knowledge for future generation and exchange knowledge through books. So that is more of like explicit medium of instruction. So we have to understand that we can introduce reading and writing naturally, like storytelling, or just having fun and using it to just write down. But we have to understand that for reading and writing, it requires more of explicit and direct instructions.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So now we have discussed factors that we can relate from first language acquisition to the second language acquisition. Now, let us see if there are any additional factors that we can consider while learning second language. So there are some theories that talk specifically about second language acquisition. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is communicating theory. So it talks about that success in second language learning depends on purpose of using language in different communication settings. So it focuses on the meaning. So it says that second language is acquired mainly to communicate and use that language in a particular situation. And it pays emphasis on the meaning. And then it says that, along with that, the knowledge of forms and structure is also acquired. But here in communicative theory, second language is acquired mainly because of the use. Now, Krashen actually gave 5 hypotheses about second language learning. So first one is acquisition learning hypothesis. So he actually distinguishes between the acquisition system versus the learning system. So he says that acquisition system requires meaningful natural communication and uses subconscious processes. The speakers actually focus on the act of communication, and learning actually requires formal instruction, learning about language explicitly. So speakers focus on the form of utterances. So we can say, like Dr. Puwoma was asking, like if theories talk about explicit and implicit learning. So this theory actually talks about 2 systems of acquisition where language is acquired. So when we talk about primary language, we say language is acquired mainly through natural stimulation, and then learning takes place through formal instructions and learning, but not everybody differentiates between language acquisition and learning. So when we talk about reading and writing, we talk more about learning to use the language, like, for example, associating symbols with meanings, associating written symbols with meaning, and then also using written symbols to express our thoughts, ideas, or feelings. And then the second hypothesis that he talks about is monitor hypothesis. So he talks about that learned system acts as a monitor for checking the correctness of utterances, that is planning, editing, and correcting. And he says that acquired system actually acts as an initiator. And there is an interaction between the 2 systems is important for second language learning. But for the monitor to be active, there has to be time to reflect on the language usage. The focus is on form. That this theory's focus is on form, and then it also talks about that the person has to have knowledge of the form. Then he talks about like talkative underusers who actually do not have enough information of form, but they talk a lot. And then they are perfectionist overusers, and then there are optimal overusers. And he talks about something called a silent period that happens. He says that silent period is a time when actually the second language learner stays silent and actually observes the interaction of people around him or her to gain information. And then once the person is ready to use the language, then this person starts using that language. So there will be a time that we can come across in our classrooms as educators where we are talking a lot in the classroom and the person is still not talking. So we might think like, hey, why is this person not talking? So in those scenarios, it is best to not force expression on such learners, but to give them time so that, they can absorb the information around them, reflect on the information, focus on the form, and use and gather their knowledge of form before they're ready to talk. So during those times, the activities such as, you can do activities like that do not require direct expression. Now, then there is natural order hypothesis. So according to this particular hypothesis, questions talks about that every language has grammar structure that is acquired in a predictable sequence. So there is a natural order, and it is not dependent on learner's age or first language. So two languages can have different natural order of acquiring language. Now, there is something that he talks about, and he calls it input hypothesis. And he says that second language acquisition follows the natural order based on input, and input must be one level above the current level of linguistic competence. So he talks about I+1 level, where the input should be given. And he says that natural communicative input is the key. And he explains how acquisition takes place when the input is provided naturally at I+1 level. Now there is affect. He also talks about affective filter hypothesis. So he says that affect actually plays a role in language learning. So he talks about motivation. So he says if motivation is high, person acquires second language like faster. He also talks about, but if the motivation is low, then the person may not be as successful. He talks about self-confidence. So it's low self-esteem versus high self-esteem. So if the person has high self-esteem, the person is going to acquire language faster. And he also talks about anxiety, low versus high. So he says like, if anxiety is high, then the person actually, the affective filter actually blocks the language input, and the person is not able to acquire language as fast as a person can acquire when anxiety levels are low. So he says that we need to have these conditions of, high self-esteem, motivation, and low anxiety, high motivation and low anxiety for this filter to let the input inside the person to absorb and learn language. And it says that positive affect alone does not explain second language acquisition, but is facilitative. So he says like, yes, affect is important. It is important it is important that the person is motivated, is confident, and has low anxiety. But he says, well, that alone is not like, cannot explain second language acquisition. But he says like affect can actually facilitate second language acquisition. And then there is another hypothesis, which talks about, it explains the errors in second language acquisition. So it is contrastive analysis hypothesis. So it says that first language influences the error made in a second language, but the problem is that all the errors that we see in second language acquisition are not based on first language. And then the L2 learn has to be learned separately. So it talks about like one can do contrastive analysis between the structure of L1 and L2 and see if there are similarities or differences and use that knowledge to acquire another language. And so this theory actually also talks about something like fossilization. So it says that some people, like you can see that some language learners have reached a plateau and you don't see like much change in their language structure. So they say like if we and that particular thing is called fossilization, like the language has reached the plateau. So if we have to break fossilization, it is important to give external input to increase the knowledge of the second language or the third language that the person is acquiring. Now, there is something called comprehensible output hypothesis, and this hypothesis focuses on the role of conversational interaction. Now, it focuses on the output, and it says that the more you practice the language, more a learner is given an opportunity to practice the language, chances the learner is going to get to observe one's own productions. So when we learn a particular language, we start forming hypotheses about that language, that we have to produce this language in this particular word order. So if a person is just like is immersed in the language environment and is not using that language, then the person will not get chances to self-reflect and then make corrections in the language output. And it also gives an opportunity to the people around that person to help this person, correct the errors that the person is making. Now, so this hypothesis talks about that learners must have opportunities to negotiate for meaning to make messages, or the output comprehensible. And so it's like learner know like what they want to say versus what they can say in that particular language. So opportunities are important for comprehension checks, clarification requests by proficient speaker, paraphrasing, and repetition by learners. Does anyone have any questions? All right. So let's talk about another hypothesis that is form-focused. Hypothesis. So it talks about that second language learning. It talks about second language learning or teaching. So it talks about drawing learners' attention to language forms and structure to create and explain with the community. Like it is important to create a context for creating the meaning and explaining the language structure. And it also talks about, how corrective feedback has to highlight the target form that the person has to correct. Now, there is something called acculturation, and it says that when a learner is socially integrated into the society that has the language that the learner wants to learn, then outcomes are better, and the outcome is better. And then it also talks about psychological integration with the speaker of L2. So if the distance between, if there is like a larger distance between the society and the speakers of L2, then the learner is going to have more challenges in acquiring language, versus if a learner is socially and psychologically integrated into the society that is speaking the language that the learner wants to acquire, then language acquisition is better. So it talks about proximity to the language target, attitude, congruence of the two culture, the desire to assimilate, preserve and adapt, and the time spent in the target culture. So if a person spends more time in a particular language, in the particular culture, the person gets more chances to imbibe the linguistic knowledge. But if the person does not feel integrated socially and psychologically, if there is a psychological distance between the speakers and the person, then language acquisition gets difficult. And it explains the communication success, but this theory does not talk about grammar, like we discussed in form focus and when we were talking about Krashen's hypothesis. So that was about the theories. Does anyone have any questions before we talk about the factors? All right. So implication for teaching and learning a second language. So from these theories, we can implicate that we can try to provide natural communicative environment wherever possible. We can use language, we can use activities that are natural for language learning, like, storytelling, engaging in conversation, just, watching a movie together and then discussing about that, provide language input in meaningful and purposeful interactions, apply principles of operant conditioning, where if the person is using the language appropriately, then, the person is praised, and the person's achievements are actually acknowledged, and then selecting language teaching strategies based on the cognitive developmental level. So if we have young learners in our if we are teaching young learners, then using more activities that are natural. If the learners are older, we can use explicit activities, we can use reflection work, we can talk and analyze and critically analyze the language work. And then providing input in the proximal zone of language development, that is one level above the current linguistic competence, through a more knowledgeable others. So for instance, we have to be, like, as educators, we have to be mindful that different learners they have different needs and they may have different zone of proximal development. So making sure that the input is provided in that zone. And if we see there is a frustration in our learners, then we modify the input accordingly. Then promote affective and psychological factors which facilitate language learning, like feeling that learners are included in in different activities, and they feel psychologically safe to participate in language learning activities or literature activities. And then different segments of language may require different strategies. Semantics and pragmatics will require more of social immersion. Communicative effectiveness and phonology and grammar will require more form-focused intervention, where the person is given feedback specific to the area that they have weakness in. And then the operant conditioning can also be used, where again, the behavior, the linguistic behavior that you want to see, the literature behavior that you want to see are encouraged, and those that you want to fade out are not reinforced. And then error analysis, that is reflecting on the language work, or how the person is talking, or using language, say written input, or even the person is reading. So analyzing, giving that learner the opportunity to correct the errors with like self-reflection, through self-reflection activities, and also when the person participates in, say, group discussions or literature discussions.
Dr. Priyanka, does this come under structural analysis, the theory? Noam Chomsky's?
Yes.
Yes,
Dr. Poon.
Yeah.
Yes. So Chomsky's theory mainly talks about like grammar, form. And according to Chomsky's theory, actually, he says that language is acquired implicitly. So he says, like, because language is acquired so quickly, so children actually learn grammar pretty fast because they already have universal grammar rules in their language acquisition device. So yes, it's a structure theory. And then I think we already went over this. And then contrastive analysis approach can be used where learner has established first language, and if the person is learning the second language, so like talking about the language, actually metalinguistic things, like talking about language, like what are the rules of the language, how it is different from, what are the rules in the first language, what are the rules in the second language or the third language, and how they are similar or different, and what we can do to be successful in using these differences or similarities to facilitate our learning or facilitate the learning of learners that we have in our classes. To provide opportunities for active learning, to practice output and modify input accordingly, to provide negotiation opportunities, to focus on messages and its communicative effect prior to focusing on grammar. So what we're talking here is like to give more opportunities to use language and then correct the form. But it can be different for different learners. Like for some learners who are interested in, gaining the grammatical proficiency, you may want to give input there. But if there are some learners who are actually very shy and they are so afraid to use the language, or say, they are afraid to write something, then it's better that we tell them to use it and write first, or read first more before actually correcting them for structures or nitty-gritties of pronunciation and stuff like that. And then provide focused corrective feedback with knowledge about rules. So to summarize, as educators, we have to understand that there are predisposing factors to language learning, be it second, first, third, or fourth, or n number. And then we have environmental factors that facilitate learning, and our learners can actually be from different ages. So we have to, depending on all these factors, we have to choose the appropriate teaching strategy that suits our learners. So we have to be careful of individual differences, and then use that knowledge to develop our teaching strategies and programs and activities, so that we are facilitating language learning in the proximal zone of development, and we are encouraging and not inducing frustration in our learners. So this is just my personal opinion. What I see is that as educators, we have to understand the goal that our learners have to acquire language. Like for some learners, they might just want to acquire language to just use it and interact Some learners want to know language just to travel and interact with people, people in the society that they're traveling to. Some learners may want to research and learn more about language. Some learners just learn language to reflect on history, and some learners just love literature. So depending on what their goals are, we have to design our teaching strategies accordingly. And there is no inferior or superior form of language. I believe it is a form of communication, but we have to just make sure that our learner is reaching the potential with the strategies that we're using in our classrooms. So that's all I have to say. These are the references. Thank you so much for your patient listening. And now the presentation is open for discussion.
So thank you, ma'am. Such a wonderful presentation was given by you. There are so many aspects you covered, from theories, ideas of acquisition, various implications, or the aspects that are related to the language. So in short, I would say your presentation was very engaging, interactive, and informative too. So dear listeners, now this session is open for question and answer. If you have any doubts, please share your question in the chat box, or you can ask by unmuting yourself.
You're most welcome, Professor Kabgate. I totally enjoyed my presentation, and thank you so much to Dr. Puvama for constantly asking questions and keeping my brain active.
So I think there are no questions, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Your
So now,
lecture was, ma'am, was so well defined. I don't think so. Everybody got the answers, and I think Puvama ma'am was supporting you to make it more vibrant, to make it more interactive, and to clear the whatever doubts were cropping up. They were instantly, you can say, snubbed down that no, we don't need something. Thank you. Thank you.
so now I invite Dr. Shamta Chaudhary ma'am, who is working as a head in the Department of English and also a director of Research and Development Center, Vardhaman Mahavir Open University, Rajasthan. Ma'am, before going into the details, let me share some biographical sketch and the academic work of ma'am. So ma'am is a very well personality in the field of academic and literature. So ma'am has written various articles in university quarterly newsletters Mira. Presently, ma'am is a deputy director of research and development at Vardhaman Mahavir Open University, Rajasthan. Ma'am has also served as an assistant director of EMPC in her university Kota. Also worked as the director of Center for Research and Distance Education in her university. Ma'am has interested in various fields, especially on the topic. She has delivered various lectures: post-colonial literature, Indian literature, Commonwealth literature, Dalit literature, contemporary and Canadian literature, short fictions, distance education, and communicative skills. Ma'am has completed her doctorate on a topic, a comparative study of formal and informal methods of teacher education in teaching English. So ma'am has written various books also. She has written various study materials for the postgraduate course in English for the University of Jammu and Punjabi University, Patiala. So ma'am is working as an expert in various examination panels for competitive examination and annual examination. Ma'am is a life member of Rajasthan Association of Studies in English, Institute for Research in Interdisciplinary Studies, Jaipur, and English Language Teachers Associations of India, Chennai. Ma'am has written and co-authored various books One of them was Perspective of Modern English Uses and Research, published by Macmillan publication. And another book was Indian Voices and Anthology of Prose, published by Orient Black Swan. So this is a wonderful, this is again wonderful personality we have as a chairperson today. So I invite Dr. Shamta Chaudhary ma'am for her remark.
Thank you, Dr. Lakshmikant sir, for giving, you can say, these are the short things which I have done. But in comparison to the people who are there in iSPELL, it's a very small, you can say, minute things I have done. They are all so wonderful, so energetic, and so vibrant that I too have to struggle a lot to do something. Today, Dr. Priyanka, you spoke so well, and means I don't have words to say. It was, yes, as Lakshmi Sir also said, your whole talk was so engaging that means I couldn't stop writing. I was continuously noting down as to what you were saying, what do you wish to convey to our listeners, to our all the audiences who are listening not only on the Zoom but also on YouTube. So it was excellent, very informative. You started with a very broader perspective of about the language acquisition. Then you spoke about the bilingualism and you throw light on the, while explaining beautifully the primary, the compound, the coordinates, the simultaneous, successful, all these, how we can acquire this language at the early stage or at the late stage, or whether we are when we are adult also. Sometimes we do have, you can say, a passion, and I do know people who love learning languages at the age of 50s and 60s also. So it's means when you interact with them, you really enjoy a lot. uh, then you also focused on how can we acquire language. See, obviously those people who have very much, means who feel that it is really tough to speak the first language, obviously the second language will be more tough. But still, they feel that they are, you can say, they can speak or write one's native language when they feel it is quite challenging for them. So imagine the plight of theirs who will be acquiring these skills of second language. Uh, you spoke that yes, every language acquisition requires efforts, commitment, and practice. Each language has its own sets of rules for speaking and writing the language properly. And the individuals trying to learn a new language often blur the line between the which sets of rules to use. As ma'am said that she used to switch from Tamil to Malayalam and all. Yes, there is a very, you can say, a very thin line, and where suddenly you feel you are in a conflict. So second language learners, they also face certain degree of fear or anxiety also sometimes while they are tackling, whether when they are learning a new language, which in turn can affect how, whether they are easily acquiring it or whether they are struggling to acquire a language. So I feel that speech, or when we speak aloud, that is very fundamental in language acquisition, because that makes or helps you to excel in a language acquisition, and we know where to apply it, where to use it, and whether you have to have that grammatical syntaxes also to be seen or not. So key to learning a new language and developing proficiency in speaking and writing that language is constancy and practice. This is what I feel. So what we as educators, as teachers, language teachers and all, we should make our students converse with others in new language on a regular basis in order to grow their fluency and confidence. In addition to that, it is important for students to continue to work with a class teacher or with the peer group on specific content areas related to the new language so that they are proficient, they know the nuances of the grammar and all. And it also, because the language is, you can say, the method of expressing ideas and emotions. And if we just speak the line or the sign and symbols to express ourselves, that would be sufficient in narrating what we want to express. So we have to use or encode or decode these symbols and signs in language. And there are, you can say, when we are a baby, when we are a small child, we learn more than we are as adults because we are more, you can say, we are biologically more matured. We know how to pronounce. We lose sometimes our confidence too. So as you said, that pronunciation can be learned or you can very fluently till the age of 6 years. By 7 to 15, you are very clear in what the meanings about it and you can comprehend as to what you are doing. And after 15, you may learn the set of grammar rules. Prior to that, it's a communicative language, which we generally tell the students or to learn it. So when you were speaking about the differences and the similarities, we can say that it basically tends to shift as per the linguistic theory of Noam Chomsky or the behavior theory of B.S. Skinner, the cognitive theory of Jean Piaget, and social interactive theory also you spoke about. I think interactionalist approaches, the complicity theory. I see I was noting everything down and I really loved it. So the theories which you spoke about, yes, in the end, when you summed up the whole thing, you really said that it all depends the strategies of the teacher. It all depends upon the heterogeneity of the class, how the learners, we have to, you can say there are different sections or the classification or the stratas of their learning also, and how the teacher has to see as to which type of teaching or which you can say level of hypothesis which have been dealt by you can be applicable in the classroom, and they can be from the knowledge can be filtered down from the teacher or from a peer group to that learner. So it is very important that when a teacher or you can say the learner is learning, they have to have a very wide area, and they have to see that there is, you can say, communicative theory also being monitored there. Then you have the different natural or the, you can say, affective or the contrastive hypothesis being applied in a class. Then only the language can be learned by the learners, and we too can feel that, yes, we are teaching them successfully a language which is not their language, but will become a language they'll master into. Thank you, ma'am. It was wonderful. I'll again say that it was really very informative and I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaudhary. You summarized everything beautifully, and I do want to talk like bilingualism. So even in children with language disorder, they can still learn two languages, and it is actually beneficial. It gives them more number of words to communicate. And when we talk about grammar, so grammar is something that we start learning very early in our life, and it is something that we keep learning throughout our life. And when it comes to second language acquisition, it's like we say something and then we reflect back on it and we're like, oh, I think I made that grammatical error. So we keep doing that analysis throughout our lives. And for example, meaning when we do presentations and when we are having a conversation with somebody, and then sometimes we feel like, did I really convey what I wanted to convey? Or sometimes you have situations where you talk to each other and you're like, oh my God, this is getting so frustrating. I'm not able to convey this information to other persons. So I think that communication is something that we keep learning, keep getting proficient with, and there is like no end to learning and getting better at communicating with each other. So thank you so much. That was so wonderful to listen to you. And I was like, wow, I really did say all those things. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not a very communicative person, but yes, I am learning. You can say that I'm very short of words. When I want to appreciate also, I think that maybe I don't appreciate. Thank you for telling me that, yes, you keep on learning and learning never ends.
Yeah, I'm learning so much from your humility. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So thank you, ma'am, for your remark. Your wonderful remark, gives us energy, motivations, and many things also. So now it's time to invite Professor G. A. Ghanshyam sir, who is a driving force, motivational figure, or the leading force of this iSPELL India. When I describes the personality of G. A. Ghanshyam sir, I always remember the lines from John Milton's, where Satan says to his soldiers, what thou the lost, the field be lost. All is not lost, the unconquerable will. So, sir always plays with the words, and we always, uh, stay motivated through his words. So, with due respect, I invite J. Ghanshyam sir, who is the founder and the general secretary of iSPELL India. And I also request sir to present the certificates as a token of love to all the speakers, chairpersons, and the other invitees. Sir, over to you.
Yeah, good evening and thank you, Lakshmikant. And your day is approaching because Lakshmi Puja is there on the cards after the Shera. So Lakshmi is always there and Lakshmi is always respected because there is a tussle between Lakshmi and Saraswati. And people always believe that Lakshmi is more potential and more sounding than Saraswati. And Saraswati says, no, 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 when I am there, then Lakshmi is bound to come. So both of them, they are struggling, and you being Lakshmi Kant, I do feel that this iSPELL has grown into leaps and bounds in the form of Lakshmis, because we do have many of the female folks, those who have joined, and especially as far as English is concerned, I'm really happy to see that many of them are the teachers of English are females, and they are really doing well. And in Hindi, we always say, and especially in Chhattisgarhi, there is a particular slogan in National Service Scheme, NSS, which goes like this: Padha likha do nari la, laika ke mahtari la. Means you make the female folk educated. And once you make the female folk educated, then you can educate the whole family. So that's the essence of it. So that's why in that way also iSPELL is not only facilitating the people to come to a particular platform, but also to make aware of the platform, promote, propagate, and then participate in various activities of iSPELL, so that not only we are going to enrich ourselves, but at the same time we are going to enrich the future generation, whom we call our own students, when we go back to the colleges, when we go back to the schools, and even in informal way also we do teach them, because formal teaching may not be taking that particular shape the way informal teaching is taking place. So informal teaching is more essential in nowadays, and like we say, play and learn and play. So all these things are always there, and I never play with words. Somehow or the other, the words, they always play a game with me. So I do enjoy the words playing a game with me. So I really enjoyed today's lecture. Dr. Priyanka, you have not only done honors on the platform of iSPELL, but you have made us to understand the nuances of the second language acquisition. And as far as second language acquisition in India is concerned, it differs from state to state, it differs from community to community, it differs from people to people, it differs from individual to individual, and every individual has a different kind of a pronunciation of it. Like in southern states of India, they do pronounce it as fixed deposit. They never say fixed deposit, they say fixed deposit. But in North, if you go, they call it fixed deposit. And in South, they call it poor. And in North, they call it poor. So POOR is known as poor. So when I came to Chhattisgarh and I said poor, they said, what is poor? I said, this is POOR. They said, this is poor. So I said, okay, I have been taught it like poor. So in that way, the pronunciation differs a lot. So in that way, this language acquisition and what we called it as received pronunciation. So received pronunciation was taken for the British pronunciation when we were studying English. And now received pronunciation is taken as the pronunciation received from the teacher. As the teacher speaks, the students are bound to speak. So nowadays, though language lab has come in most of the institutions, but till today, I feel no computer can teach you much better than the society itself. So society is the only lab in the entire universe. And we must believe this. If we go on contacting people, meeting people, interacting with people, listening to the people, the more we can acquire knowledge than getting into the books, than getting into various so-called softwares and hardwares. We have forgotten one thing, though the softwares are there, though the hardwares are there, but we are lacking human wares. So let all of us join together to have more and more human wares together, because this software and hardwares are the byproduct of the human wares. So we need to understand that whenever we acquire any kind of a language, one language has to be acquired that's none other than the humanitarian language. So we all need to acquire that kind of a language, which is highly essential in this highly technological world of ours. So thank you, Dr. Priyanka, for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL. I do congratulate Dr. Kshamata Chaudhary, because the ability with which she speaks, and her name also suggests she is the able person. So when the person becomes able, then only the people, they call them Kshamata. So she has the ability in her not only to elaborate the things, not only to make the things very clear, but at the same time, she has taken out time to elaborate various things, and she is really doing well. And she is the one who has supported iSPELL right from the beginning for making it go live. And she was the one who has given us the license for Google Meet. So I never ever forget the support which I received from Dr. Kshamta for not only making us to go live, but also was there dot at 4 o'clock. And after that, Mr. Pramod is doing everything. So these two people are the great pillars of iSPELL, without whom we never ever think of iSPELL. And what iSPELL has attained today is just because of Dr. Kshamta and Dr. Pramod, Mr. Pramod Dhengle, who is going to be the doctor.
It's your humbleness that you have given us this honor, but it is you who are the motivator. We do feel sometimes we stumble down, but you have always kept this flag high, and we do hope that it is always high. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Dr. Kshamta. My motive is to elevate. My motive is to aviate. So that's why motivate. Motivate itself says motive is to aviate. So we are aviating each other so that we can reach to a particular level. So this certificate on behalf of Indigenous Society for the Promotion of English Language and Literature, which is proudly known as iSPELL. This certificate we present to Dr. Priyanka for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL in the 109th E-Sunday Sahityik Satsang. And probably we are going to create Guinness record, as we haven't stopped a single Sunday. We haven't even have a break for a single Sunday, and continuously we are organizing this event. And I do congratulate each one of you, those who are the speakers on the platform of iSPELL, for bringing yourself with iSPELL and not only elevating the level of iSPELL, but also illuminating all of us. Thank you, Dr. Priyanka.
Thank you so much.
This certificate goes to Dr. Kshamta Chaudhary for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL. She is the coordinator of iSPELL, and she is also the pillar who is behind the successful story of iSPELL. So this certificate goes to Dr. Kshamta Chaudhary, and this certificate has the registration number of iSPELL also.
Thank you.
This certificate goes to my young friend, Dr. Lakshmikant,
for doing the honors on the platform of iSPELL, and he is from East Maharashtra Forum. So we are bringing the people from the forum in the form of chairperson and also the event coordinator. So Dr. Lakshmikant, Mr. Lakshmikant, going to be the Dr. Lakshmikant. This certificate is on behalf of iSPELL for your wonderful deliberation. I think he is dealing. Okay. This is our next event. It's on 16th of October. We will be having Mr. C.P. Belliyappa, and Dr. Virendra Turkar will be the chairperson, and master of ceremonies will be Dr. Archana Singh from Chhattisgarh. So do join us at 4 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Another event with another person, and the topic is the future of English in today's context. So let all of us believe that the future of English should go very bright, vibrant, innovative, creative, dynamic, enterprising, and whatnot, so that our future will be safe in the hands of English. So thank you very much. Over to Dr. Lakshmikant.
Thank you, sir. Hello.
Yes,
Am I audible now?
yes, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So thank you, sir. Thank you for your wonderful words and your remark. Now I would like to invite Dr. A.S. Puamma ma'am, who is the event coordinator of today's 109th Sunday Site Reception. Ma'am is working as a principal and head of the Department of English at Kaveri College, Gonikopal, Kodagu, Karnataka. So I request ma'am to propose vote of thanks. Please, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Lakshmikant. Before I begin, I must remind that if Kshamata Chaudhary ma'am is the star of iSPELL, Professor Gansham is the rainbow. I don't know how he could forget that. So he's the rainbow of iSPELL. So let me now begin. I thank you for being such a wonderful audience. And let us express our appreciation to our keynote speaker, Dr. Priyanka Shailat, for enlightening us on second language acquisition. Special thanks to the IT coordinator, Mr. Pramod Dengle sir, for successfully coordinating the event. And of course, my heartfelt gratitude to the creator, founder of iSPELL, Professor J. Gansham sir, the president of iSPELL, Anupama Vora madam, and the vice president Ashok Sachdev sir and Prashant Chakraborty, and all the other national executive members of iSPELL for successfully navigating the ship of iSPELL to its desired destination, and for their unflinching support and coordination. Our heartfelt thanks to all the participants. My sincere thanks to Professor Kshamata Chaudhary ma'am for beautifully summing up the main discourse on second language acquisition and its implications. It was actually, I really must thank the whole of the iSPELL team because this is the very scintillating platform that really motivates everyone. I mean, the one who really love language and literature, this is the platform that will really motivate them to scale higher up, to elevate themselves, and to enjoy the fruit of literature within themselves. And I feel iSPELL is like our KRS dam. I think Priyanka also will know because she was in Mysore. And of course, Professor Gansham also, the Krishnaraj Sagar Dam. What I mean to say is every Sunday, the Sahitya Satsang will open the gate for all the literary lovers. So it is that established dam that will open the gate for everybody to, learn, enjoy, and then within themselves, they'll start growing. It's growing within. And this is a powerful platform. And I'm extremely happy to be part of this. And I thank each and every one of you for doing such a wonderful task every Sunday and bringing so many, erudite scholars on this platform and sharing their thoughts, their intellectual richness that spreads far and wide, not only in India, probably, it could be even from people abroad. If they want to, they can also listen to. So this is such a wonderful platform. And I'll be failing in my duty if I do not thank Captain Indrani for shouldering my responsibility the previous Sunday Sahityik Satsang, the 108th Sunday Sahityik Satsang, and for successfully coordinating that event on the previous Sunday. My heartfelt gratitude and thanks to Dr. Indrani, and I thank all the iSPELL team for standing with me the last Sunday. Thank you profusely. Thank you so much, everyone. Yes, Lakshmikant.
So thank you, ma'am. My special thanks, and I express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Puoma ma'am also, who is the event coordinator of today's Sahitya Satsang. Thank you all. Thank you for joining us, and I express my sincere gratitude to you all once again. Thank you.
Thank you.